I never expected to walk into a courtroom and watch my neighbor get arrested in front of a judge. But then again, I never expected a grown woman to forge legal documents just to evict me from my own home. It all started 6 weeks ago with a letter shoved into my mailbox. Not mailed shoved. No postage, no return address, just an envelope with my name, half crumpled like someone couldn't decide whether to throw it or deliver it. Inside was a notice. Legal eviction proceedings initiated failure to appear may result in immediate seizure of property. At first I thought it was junk, the kind of scam mail that floats around pretending to be government business. But something about it stopped me cold. The formatting, the font, it looked real. It had a stamped seal and everything. But there was one glaring issue. I hadn't missed any mortgage payments. I owned my home outright, and I'd never signed a single document binding me to the HOA. Which brings us to Karen. Karen had been gunning for me since the moment I moved in 3 years ago. I was the only black homeowner on the street, and I ran my business from my Garagea custom furniture studio. She called it industrial activity. I called it therapy with a sander. I kept the noise down, never blocked the road, never dumped a thing, but it didn't matter. She sent warnings, then fines, then threats. All fake, all hand-delivered, all signed President. Cedar Grove HOA. Only Cedar Grove hadn't had a legally recognized HOA in over a decade. The group had disbanded after a lawsuit over fraudulent landscaping fees. But Karen? She just kept it going like the queen of a kingdom no one recognized. The day after I got that letter, I drove to the county clerk's office. I asked if any eviction filings had been made under my name. The clerk typed, paused, frowned, then said, "Not officially, but there's a filing here. It's sealed." "Sealed?" I asked. "By who?" She turned the screen toward me, and there it was. A motion for emergency HOA enforcement, filed under the name of Judge Malcolm Reyes. I didn't recognize the name, but the clerk did. "That's not one of our active judges," she said. "He retired last year." I felt the ground shift under my feet. I wasn't just being harassed. Karen had faked an official court document and filed it under a retired judge's name. I thanked the clerk, took photos, and called an attorney friend from my veterans network. His name was Isaac Monroe. Ex-Jag. Razor sharp. When I sent him the photos, he called me back laughing, not out of humor, but disbelief. "This is the sloppiest forgery I've ever seen," he said. "Wrong date format, missing clerk stamp, and she used an outdated version of the court header. This wouldn't pass middle school civics." He helped me draft a motion to unseal the filing and schedule an emergency review before a sitting judge, Judge Andrea Coleman. She was known for her no-nonsense attitude and deep respect for the rule of law. I gathered every paper Karen had ever left at my door, printed every fake notice, and arrived that morning with Isaac at my side and a folder thick enough to stop a bullet. I didn't expect Karen to show, but she did. Oh, she marched into that courtroom like she was there to receive a medal. Dressed in her most official HOA gear khaki pantsuit, HOA lapel pin, binder in hand. She didn't bring a lawyer. Just herself and a smug expression that said, "I've gotten away with this before, and I'll do it again." Judge Coleman looked at both of us, adjusted her glasses, and said, "Let's begin." Karen stood immediately. "Your Honor, I'm here to protect this community from a dangerous property. This man has violated every rule, every standard of our neighborhood. He operates a commercial enterprise from a residential zone. He's refused all compliance, and as HOA president, I was forced to take emergency legal action." The judge raised one eyebrow. "And you filed this action when?" Karen opened her binder. "March 3rd. Judge Coleman flipped through the unsealed file. "And you submitted this under the authority of Judge Malcolm Reyes?" "Yes," Karen said proudly. "He authorized emergency powers for HOA enforcement in 2014, and I have a continuation clause from his ruling." Judge Coleman paused. Then she asked the question that changed everything. "Where is your authorization to file documents under his name post-retirement?" Karen blinked. I continued his ruling as an acting HOA representative. His decision still stands. Judge Coleman leaned forward. Mrs. Trask, Judge Reyes retired 14 months ago. His decisions do not authorize you to file new actions under his name. There is no continuation clause. This filing is fraudulent. The document header uses the wrong court address. The stamp is outdated. And the signature, she held up the page, is a cut and paste from an old docket. Sloppy. Karen paled. I'll ask once, clearly, the judge said, her voice like ice. Did you fabricate or knowingly submit falsified documents in an attempt to initiate a court action against your neighbor? Karen stammered. I used an old template. It's a formatting error. Then why is Judge Reyes' name typed manually where the court system would auto-generate the sitting judge's name? No answer. The courtroom was dead silent. I could feel Isaac beside me, perfectly still, waiting. Karen opened her mouth, closed it again, and finally whispered, I just wanted to make him follow the rules. The judge leaned back. Bailiff. The bailiff stepped forward without hesitation. Karen took a half step back. You are hereby placed under immediate review for criminal contempt and fraud. You knowingly submitted falsified documents to the court, impersonated a judge, and attempted to manipulate legal procedure to harass a homeowner. You will be remanded for booking pending formal charges. Karen gasped. You're arresting me? For paperwork. No, Judge Coleman said sharply. I'm arresting you for impersonating the court. The cuffs clicked shut with a finality I'll never forget. Karen didn't even resist, just stood there, stiff and silent as the bailiff guided her toward the exit. Her binder dropped to the floor with a thud, pages spilling across the marble tile like the unraveling of her whole facade. I stood still as she passed me, her eyes wide with something that wasn't quite regret, more like disbelief. Disbelief that her fantasy of power had finally collided with reality, and the law didn't blink. Judge Coleman looked at me with a steadiness that carried weight beyond the bench. Mr. Daniels, I am deeply sorry you were put through this. The abuse of the court is no small matter. Your patience and your documentation were admirable. I nodded slowly, still processing what had just happened. Isaac placed a hand on my shoulder, a quiet show of solidarity that said, You did this right. As we walked out of that courtroom, the hallway was lined with whispers. Word had traveled fast. Outside, a few neighbors were gathered near the steps not because I asked them to, but because truth has a way of drawing people. Clara from 2 doors down. Old Mr. Jensen with his walker. Even Lacey and her husband, who'd never so much as waved before, stood there waiting. She really tried to evict you? Clara asked, wide-eyed. Tried to fake a court order, I replied. Filed it under a retired judge's name. Mr. Jensen let out a wheeze of disbelief. She always acted like she ran the neighborhood, but I never thought she'd try something like that. Isaac leaned in. And we've only scratched the surface. The prosecutor's reviewing everything. This could get deeper. Deeper it did. Over the next 2 weeks, an investigation opened into Karen's activities as self-proclaimed HOA president. Turns out, she'd been issuing violation fees to residents, dozens of them. Some paid out of fear, others didn't even know. The money? Tracked to a personal account under the name Cedar Grove Renewal Fund. A fund with no board, no oversight, no legal existence. Just Karen, collecting dues in a fantasy court of her own design. More neighbors came forward. One had received a forged fire inspection warning. Another had their security lights unscrewed after refusing to trim their hedges. Karen had quietly ruled through fear, playing judge, jury, and debt collector. But not anymore. When the sheriff's office raided her house quietly, respectfully, but thoroughly, they found binders labeled compliance targets, complete with photos and notes. There was a whole section labeled neutralize resistance. My name had an entire tab. It would have been terrifying if it hadn't been so pathetically desperate. The trial date was set for 3 months later. The charges: felony fraud, obstruction of justice, filing false legal documents, and impersonation of a public official. She was also slapped with a restraining order banning her from interacting with any of the residents she targeted. When the trial began, I was there. So were 25 other neighbors. Karen showed up in a gray suit, visibly thinner, her hair pulled back tight. She didn't speak a word. Her lawyer did all the talking, but it didn't help. The evidence was overwhelming. Judge Reyes himself even submitted a video statement confirming he had never granted authority to Karen or anyone affiliated with the HOA. The courtroom, once her imagined kingdom, became the stage for her collapse. The jury didn't need long. Guilty on all counts. Sentencing followed quickly. 2 years in county jail, 5 years of probation, and restitution to every resident she had illegally fined. Her personal property was auctioned off to pay the damages. The fake HOA dissolved permanently under a court injunction. And her name? Struck from every public-facing document tied to the neighborhood. But something else happened too, something unexpected. The neighborhood changed. With Karen gone, we started rebuilding. Not with concrete or fences, but with trust. We hosted monthly meetings in the park. No board titles, just community discussion. People spoke freely for the first time. Lacey taught a yoga class for seniors. Mr. Jensen's grandson started mowing lawns for the block. Clara and I co-organized a Saturday market for local makers. I sold custom wood benches. Isaiah sold honey. It wasn't flashy, but it was ours. At one of those meetings, a quiet woman stood up. I didn't recognize her at first. She was small, anxious, and clutched a folder tightly. Her voice trembled as she said, "My name is Teresa. I'm Karen's daughter." The air shifted. She looked around, nervous, then continued. "I moved away years ago. I always thought my mom was just strict, controlling. But after everything happened, I found her journals. I read what she wrote about all of you, about this neighborhood. She was so scared of being irrelevant that she tried to build a world where she mattered more than the truth. She opened the folder and pulled out a letter. She wanted me to give you this." We braced ourselves. But what came next was surprising. It wasn't an apology. Not quite. But it was something close. In shaky handwriting, Karen had written, "If you're reading this, I guess it all caught up to me. Maybe I went too far. Maybe I wanted to matter more than I should have. I wanted to feel needed, and instead I turned people against me. I don't ask forgiveness, I wouldn't know what to do with it. But I do hope you use the quiet I've left behind to make something better." The silence after Teresa finished reading was deep. Not out of sympathy, but maybe something close to release. I stepped forward, thanked her, and invited her to stay for chili. She did. That night, as the sun dipped below the trees and kids ran through sprinklers, I stood at my workshop's edge watching the neighborhood breathe easy for the first time in years. No more fake violations. No more late-night threats. Just voices. Just stories. Just the slow, beautiful rebuilding of something stronger than fear. So yeah, Karen faked court papers, and it got her hauled out in cuffs. But maybe, just maybe, the real punishment was that her kingdom didn't fall in flames. It faded into something real, something she never could control. And now I ask you, was I wrong to let her destroy herself? Was it justice or mercy to stand firm and let the truth do the talking? You tell me.